Interested in the offensive side of security.
Yeah, I've heard a lot about both of these. I'm very interested to hear your take.
Our mission is to try and give you a solid understanding of both how vulnerabilities work and how attackers actually think, so you can use that to better improve your own defenses.
Right, that sounds really helpful.
And we're going to be talking about some pretty captivating stuff, things like executing code on a Cisco IP phone just by sending a specially crafted ping command.
Oh, wow, that's scary. Okay, I'm ready.
Let's start by deconstructing some really infamous exploits that you probably already know. First up, Log4Shell.
Oh, yeah, that was the one that seemed to be everywhere back in 2021.
It enabled remote code execution on just a massive scale.
I remember, yeah, it seemed like every company was scrambling to patch their systems.
Yeah, and for good reason. Log4Shell, officially CVE 2021-44228, the root cause was a feature in a very popular library called Log4j.
Oh, yeah, Log4j, that rings a bell.
And that feature is called JNDI.
JNDI, okay. I think I remember that. What does that do again?
JNDI was enabled by default in Log4j, and so think of JNDI like it's a way for applications to find and load resources from a directory service.
Okay, so it's kind of like looking up information.
Exactly.
Yeah.
The problem was Log4j didn't sanitize the information that it received before making those JNDI lookups.
So attackers could like inject bad stuff?
Yeah, so attackers could inject malicious code into data that would be logged, and then Log4j would just blindly execute it.
Instead of fetching like a harmless resource, it would end up running the attacker's code.
Yeah, basically.
Okay.
And since Log4j is used in just countless applications, the attack surface for this was massive.
Wow, yeah.
It was kind of like a perfect storm of detectable debt.
Right, all that unmaintained code.
Yeah, and the vastness of the Java ecosystem.
Oh, that makes sense. So like a harsh lesson in the importance of secure coding practices.
Definitely, and dependency management.
Oh, yeah, for sure. What about those Atlassian Confluence CVEs?
Oh, those are interesting ones too.
Yeah. What were the numbers again?
2023-225-15 and 2023-225-18.
Okay, and what made those so impactful?
Those were all about broken access controls
Yeah.
and just taking advantage of some simple logic flaws.
Okay.
So 2023-225-15, that one let anyone create admin accounts on Confluence servers. And the reason is because a setup endpoint remained accessible even after the server was configured.
Oh, so attackers could essentially trick the system into thinking it was still being set up.
Yeah, pretty much.
That seems like a pretty basic oversight.
You'd be surprised how often those basic oversights actually happen in real software.
Oh, I bet. I bet. What about the other one?
The other one, CVE 2023-225-18, that one let attackers upload malicious code disguised as a backup file.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
How is that even possible? Shouldn't there be checks in place to prevent that kind of thing?
Ideally, yeah. But in this case, the backup and restore functionality lacked those checks.
Oh, okay.
So attackers could plant like a web shell right into the web root.
So that basically bypasses all the security?
Yeah, pretty much.
Oh, that's wild. So, yeah, another lesson there, secure development practices are super important.
Definitely. Now let's look at a vulnerability that I think hit a little bit closer to home for more people.
Okay, what's that?
CVE 2023-2007-8.
Okay.
A flaw in Cisco IP phones.
Interesting. Okay, so like office phones.
Yeah, office phones.
Okay. I'm all ears.
This one was especially sneaky.
Okay.
It allowed attackers to inject commands into something as simple and seemingly harmless as the ping command.
Wait, the ping command, like the one you use to just check if a server is up?
Yeah, the one used to just check network connectivity.
Oh, wow.
Because of poor input sanitization in the phone's web interface, an attacker could tack on extra commands to the ping parameter. And since the web service ran with elevated privileges, those commands could compromise the entire system.
Yikes. So like even a simple ping could lead to, a full-blown compromise.
Yeah, exactly. So a good reminder to never underestimate your potential attack surface.
Yeah, it could really be anything.
Now let's shift gears a little bit and try to step into the shoes of an attacker. Our second source here is actually a guide for aspiring offensive hackers.
Okay.
And it outlines the steps that they might take to exploit vulnerabilities like the ones that we just discussed.
So like their playbook.
Yeah,
Got
their
it.
playbook. And the first step is reconnaissance.
Okay. Reconnaissance, so like gathering intel.
Gathering intel is absolutely crucial for attackers. It's like a detective doing their groundwork before they make an arrest.
Right, so profiling their target.
Exactly. And there's two main types,
Yeah.
passive and active reconnaissance.
Okay, what's the difference?
Passive reconnaissance is gathering information without directly interacting with the target. Think scouring websites, searching public records, analyzing social media posts.
Oh, interesting. So like kind of being like a digital private investigator.
Exactly. Attackers might even try to find GitHub commits that accidentally expose API keys or passwords.
Oh, wow. That happens.
It happens more than you'd think. Then there's active reconnaissance, which involves actually engaging with the target's systems, but in a controlled way.
Oh, okay. Give me an example.
So, using the dig command to attempt DNS zone transfers.
Okay.
That can reveal a ton of information about the target's network infrastructure.
Oh, interesting. Okay.
So reconnaissance is all about building a profile of your target, finding those weaknesses, and just gathering the intel you need to launch a successful attack.
Right. So do their homework.
Do their homework. Next phase is vulnerability identification.
Okay.
Attackers, they want to find those cracks in the armor.
Right. The things they can actually exploit. Do they use automated scanners for that?
Scanners have their place,
Okay.
but relying solely on them is kind of a rookie mistake. They often generate false positives, and they miss a lot of the more subtle vulnerabilities.
Okay.
Real attackers will dig much deeper.
So they actually do it manually.
Manually, yeah.
Wow. Okay. So what kind of manual techniques are we talking about here?
So one common technique is subdomain enumeration. That's about uncovering hidden subdomains that might be hosting vulnerable applications.
So like finding those secret rooms in a mansion.
Yeah, exactly. And they might leverage things like certificate transparency logs. They might use DNS brute forcing with word lists. Another crucial step is fingerprinting the target's technology stack,
What does that mean?
figuring out what software and systems they're actually using.
Oh, okay.
So that helps attackers choose the right exploits for the job.
Right. So tailoring it to that specific target.
Precisely. And attackers may even try to map out the human infrastructure of the target organization,
Oh, that's interesting. What do you mean by that?
like identifying key personnel and their roles.
Why is that important?
It helps them craft very targeted phishing attacks, a classic social engineering tactic.
Oh, right. Yeah.
So, by impersonating a trusted individual, attackers can trick employees into revealing sensitive information or even downloading malware.
Oh, that's cool.
Clever, but devious.
Yeah.
Really highlights the importance of security awareness training for your employees.
Oh, for sure. Definitely.
Now, once attackers have identified those vulnerabilities, it's time for the main event, exploitation.
Okay. Let's talk about that in part 2.
Okay, sounds good. We'll pick up right where we left off, and we'll talk about how attackers actually weaponize those vulnerabilities.
I'm excited to learn more about that. Okay, I'm ready to dive back in. Let's get into it.
All right, so we left off talking about how attackers find and identify those vulnerabilities. Now let's get into the nitty-gritty of how they actually exploit those weaknesses.
Yeah, this is the part I've been waiting for. So, what are some of the most common attack vectors?
Well, one very classic approach is web parameter tampering. Think of it like manipulating the values in a web form
Okay.
to try and trick the application into doing something it shouldn't.
Can you give me an example of that?
Sure. So say you're shopping online, and the URL includes a parameter like price 100. An attacker might change that to price 1
Okay.
to see if the system accepts negative values, which it probably shouldn't.
Right. And that could potentially lead to all sorts of unexpected behavior.
Exactly. It all depends on how well the application handles and validates its input. Then there are things like memory corruption vulnerabilities, which are a bit more technically complex.
Right. Aren't those the ones that attackers can exploit using debuggers? You mentioned that in the last part.
That's right. Attackers can manipulate the memory of a program,
Okay.
actually hijack its execution flow.
Yeah.
Think of it like rewriting the instructions in a recipe to change the outcome of the dish.
So they're essentially reprogramming the application on the fly.
Yeah, pretty much.
Wow. Okay. What about database interactions?
Ah, yes. The infamous SQL injection. Still a major threat, even after all these years. It's all about crafting malicious SQL queries
Okay.
that get executed by the database server.
I've heard about that one, but I'm not sure I fully grasp how it works. Can you walk me through it?
Sure. So imagine a login form where you enter your username and password.
Okay.
If the application doesn't sanitize those inputs properly, an attacker might be able to inject SQL code into the username field.
Oh, okay.
So instead of just checking if the username exists, the database ends up running the attacker's malicious code.
Wow. So it completely bypasses the intended functionality.
Exactly. And with a cleverly crafted query, an attacker could do all sorts of damage,
Yeah.
like stealing data, modifying records, even gaining full control of the database server.
It's mind-boggling how a simple web form can be such a potent attack vector.
That's why secure coding practices are so crucial. Every input needs to be treated with extreme caution.
Right, don't trust anything.
Don't trust anything, sanitize it thoroughly.
Makes sense. Now, what about shellcode? You mentioned that earlier, but I don't think we really got into the details of what it is.
Oh yeah, so shellcode is the actual malicious code that attackers want to execute on a compromised system. It's typically written in a very low-level language, like assembly,
Okay.
and designed to be very compact and stealthy.
So once an attacker has exploited a vulnerability, they inject the shellcode into the target's memory.
Precisely.
Yeah.
And that shellcode can do all sorts of things depending on the attacker's goal, whether it's opening a back door, stealing data, launching further attacks.
That's pretty scary. So the initial exploit is really just the first step. What happens after attackers have gained that initial foothold?
That's where post-exploitation comes in.
Okay.
The initial compromise is often just the beginning. Attackers might want to move laterally within the network,
Okay.
gain access to more sensitive systems or data.
So it's like a game of dominoes. One compromise can lead to another.
Exactly. And they often use very manual techniques to stay under the radar.
Manual. Wouldn't automated tools be more efficient?
They can be, but they also tend to be much noisier and more easily detected by security software.
Ah, okay. So they want to stay hidden.
They want to stay hidden, so the manual approach is often preferred.
So what are some of these manual post-exploitation techniques that attackers use?
One very common technique is credential harvesting, all about stealing usernames and passwords.
But I thought passwords were hashed and stored securely. How do they steal those?
They are, but attackers have ways of extracting those credentials from memory.
Oh, okay.
So they might dump the memory of a critical process called LSAS, which often contains sensitive login information.
So they're stealing the keys to the kingdom from the system's memory.
Exactly. And once they have valid credentials, they can move laterally, accessing other systems, escalating their privileges. Another common post-exploitation technique is network sniffing.
Oh, okay. So listening in on network traffic.
That's right. Attackers can capture traffic on switch networks,
Okay.
even if they're not directly connected to the target device,
Right.
potentially intercepting sensitive data in transit.
That's why encryption is so crucial,
Encryption is huge.
because it protects that data even if they manage to sniff the traffic.
Absolutely. Another important aspect of post-exploitation is establishing persistence,
What does that mean?
ensuring that they can maintain access to the compromised system even if the original vulnerability is patched.
Oh, okay. So they're planting backdoors.
Planting backdoors so they can come and go as they please. They might create rogue user accounts, modify system files, install hidden malware that gives them remote control.
Wow, that's really sneaky and incredibly difficult to detect.
It is. That's why security professionals need to be extremely vigilant,
Okay.
proactive in their defenses, regularly monitoring system logs, looking for that suspicious activity, implementing strong security controls. These can all make a huge difference.
So what happens after they've established that persistence and gathered the data that they need? What's their end goal?
Well, that really depends on the attacker's goals. They might exfiltrate the data, use it for extortion, launch further attacks within the compromised network.
This has been a real eye-opening look into the attacker's playbook. I'm starting to realize just how sophisticated and persistent they can be.
Absolutely. But understanding their techniques is the first step towards defending against them.
So what can we do to actually strengthen our defenses and protect ourselves from these kinds of attacks?
Well, stay tuned because in part 3, we're going to shift gears and focus on practical tips for bolstering your security posture. Welcome back. In this final part of our deep dive, we're going to focus on defense.
Yeah, this is what I'm most interested in. Knowing all these attack vectors is fascinating, but I want to know how to actually protect systems in the real world.
Exactly. So let's start with the absolute basics batching.
Oh, yeah.
It may seem obvious, but keeping your software up to date is one of the most effective ways to mitigate vulnerabilities.
It's easy to fall behind on patches, though, especially in large organizations with complex IT environments.
It's definitely a challenge,
Yeah.
but it's crucial to prioritize it. A good vulnerability management program is essential. Next up is input validation. That's a fundamental security principle that we've kind of touched on throughout this whole deep dive.
Right. You mentioned it in the context of SQL injection and other web application exploits.
It applies to any system that processes external input. Always sanitize data, enforce data type and length checks, and use a whitelist approach whenever possible.
So assume that all input is malicious until proven otherwise.
Exactly. That's the mindset. Then there's the principle of least privilege, which is a cornerstone of secure system design.
Right. That's about limiting access to only what's absolutely necessary.
Right, precisely. Don't give users or applications more privileges than they actually need to do their jobs. That limits the damage an attacker can do, even if they manage to gain a foothold.
So it's all about minimizing the blast radius.
Exactly. What about network security?
Yeah, that's a big one.
Huge topic. But some key points to remember: firewalls, intrusion detection systems, and network segmentation.
Those are the classic layers of defense.
They are, and for good reason. Firewalls act as gatekeepers, controlling traffic flow in and out of your network. Intrusion detection systems, they monitor for suspicious activity, alert you to potential attacks. And network segmentation isolates critical systems, limiting the spread of an attack.
So even if one part of the network is compromised, the damage is
Yeah,
continued.
it's like having bulkheads in a ship.
Okay, I like that analogy.
And of course, let's not forget the human element.
You mean security awareness training?
Absolutely. Employees are often the weakest link in the security chain. Training them to spot phishing attempts, recognize suspicious emails, follow good security practices, it can significantly reduce your risk.
It's about making security everyone's responsibility, not just the IT departments.
Couldn't have said it better myself. One final point I want to emphasize:
Hey.
the importance of incident response planning.
Right, having a plan in place for when things go wrong.
Exactly. No matter how strong your defenses are, you need to be prepared for the possibility of a breach. Having a well-rehearsed incident response plan can help you contain the damage, recover quickly, and just minimize the impact on your business.
That makes a lot of sense. It's all about being proactive, prepared, and resilient.
Precisely. So to wrap things up, remember that cybersecurity is a continuous journey, not a destination. Stay informed, stay vigilant, and never stop learning.
I'll definitely be keeping these lessons in mind as I dive deeper into the world of security. This deep dive has given me a lot to think about.
And that's what we aim for. We hope this deep dive has given you a better understanding of the threat landscape, the attacker's mindset, and most importantly, the steps you can take to strengthen your own defenses. Stay safe out there.